smooth. No, you're fine the whole time? Lovely. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. So here we are. We've had a jam-packed day of sessions, and I'm very grateful for everybody for their time and the team for putting everything together, and super excited to have we've got Brad here. Well, I'm going to allow Jay, who's the Global Vice Chair of Markets for EY, to introduce the Global Ernst & Young of the Entrepreneur of the Year award winners to all of you. And it's very exciting because we've had an amazing relationship with EY over the years. We've had a whole bunch of YPOs, as Brad is, in those awards, and for very good reason. And we're very excited to have two such great luminaries here and interviewed by our partners at EY as well. So we first met in Monaco at an Entrepreneur of the Year award, which was a couple of years ago, something like that. And they are super exciting. And this team has pulled together quite a lot of things to make YPO a position where it can connect with the super things that you guys are doing and our 29,000 members. And it takes a lot of people to do that. And I want to thank the management, and a big shout out to all the people, Dimitri and others who have helped to bring together some of the speakers, and particularly our chairs, past and future, our CEO and everybody. So thank you all. And I'd like to ask Jay to introduce our two panelists. Thank you very much, Jay.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. This is going to be, I think, a good dialogue and discussion, so we'll try to keep it active. Let me do the formal introductions, and then at that point, I suspect any script I've written down on this piece of paper is going to go right out the window because these guys will take over and talk about what they want to talk about. But to my immediate left, Brad Keywell is the founder and CEO of Uptake Technologies. He is the World Entrepreneur of the Year winner for 2019 globally, as well as being the America's winner. So congratulations, Brad. He's a lifelong entrepreneur. He has founded a number of companies, and Uptake's the latest, but he was involved in Groupon, Driven, Tempest, MediaOcean, and really been recognized by Forbes and others for what he does for entrepreneurship and startups. So we're really thrilled to have Brad here as kind of the ambassador of WEOY, but also really what is happening in the new world of cutting edge technology. So Brad, thank you for joining us. And then Andrew Forrester is the chairman of Mindaru Foundation, and in 2018, was awarded the World Entrepreneur of the Year Social Impact Award. So Andrew is also an entrepreneur himself, having founded and built Fortescue, right, which is the fourth largest iron ore miner in the world, but also very active in giving back to society. So he and his wife in 2001 set up Mindaru, and that foundation is something we're going to talk about. So over 250 initiatives, many initially based in Australia, but now globally. And so, guys, I want to kind of first get your perspective on entrepreneurship and on Davos, and kind of what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and just the venue, and obviously what YPO does in terms of bringing and connecting kind of young entrepreneurs and startups and those who are emerging. Just the opportunity that you're seeing here, your first day, and you guys have both been here before, but Brad, maybe you start with you.
Sure. Davos is a remarkable gathering. The forum's created a situation where the density of leaders and decision makers is just remarkable in a short period of time. So the value of connecting with so many people in such a short period of time in such a condensed place is great. The broader value of talking about social impact and things that are not always the subject of quarterly earnings calls or monthly reviews of numbers is also a pretty unique opportunity. The one, I think there is more generally less entrepreneurs than you would think here. And I'm not sure that's good or bad. I think that there's a extraordinary hurdle to get here financially. There's a small number of opportunities. We've been fortunate to have one of those, which is a technology pioneer program, which is sort of an entry point for entrepreneurs to be a part of this community. But ultimately, what YPO is doing, I think, is of service to the entrepreneurs that are here, because the YPO community is so broad. And I joined YPO in 1997, so a pretty long tenure for a 50-year-old. And the community that I see, or the activation that's happening this year, I think is at a highest level ever in terms of YPO actively being a convener. Andrew, what do you think?
No, well said. Look, I think Davos is great. Personally, I would pick a better venue. I'd put, one which wasn't stuck in the middle of the ice and you had to drive to for hours and hours to get to, and then you have to eat Swiss cheese the whole time. No, just kidding around. I mean, I don't mind being anywhere where you're wall-to-wall machine guns, but look, and I think that's because there aren't so many entrepreneurs here. Entrepreneurs are about to make it big. So many people here have made it big politically or run very large businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's great if you're an entrepreneur to tap into these very large businesses. You can often call them customers or investors. But there's a real strength here, I think, if you've got a very strong philanthropic cause. We're here for artificial intelligence governance risk. We see that as probably the key risk facing civilization, and the key risk facing the environment immediately is plastic. And there's so much bad news to come out about plastic. I don't know where to begin. But you can get an audience, Brad, with decision makers at that very high level and say, look, this is what's happening. You don't have to worry about fish. Start worrying about humans. That's what's going to be attacked by plastic shortly.
Right. Well, guys, I want to get to that, but I want to start first because some of the issues that you faced in your own businesses as entrepreneurs have been issues that have been talked about here at Davos. So, Brad, kind of the disruption of technology, workforce, the fourth industrial revolution, and just as you think about how your technology, quote, replaces people, what are you also doing to kind of retrain, reskill, and try to find ways to keep people gainfully employed, perhaps in other areas and capacities? How do you address that as an entrepreneur?
So the core headline of the forum for the last, 5 years has been the fourth industrial revolution. And the company that I started 5.5 years ago is in service of that by equipping machines with, or deriving data from machines and then delivering to the front lines of industry insights so that they can be more productive, more reliable, more safe. So we're focused on machines and the people that are maintaining, operating, and responsible for machines, because our belief is at the core of a lot of the improvement of the Industrial Revolution that's happening is more with the same. So same amount of machines should be able to do more in terms of output, that therefore reducing the need for more investment and therefore availing opportunities that would lead to better utilization of resources. All of which leads to this reality that you've got AI and machine learning available, but people are not yet prepared or willing to use it. And that's an issue that is more topical this year than ever, because the skepticism of machine learning and AI and sort of breakthrough enterprise technology is waning. The acceptance of this opportunity to do more with the same and be more precise in your operations is now normalized, that people understand it can be done. How do you incent people to actually do something that's logical, which is the same issue around the climate? And how do you just explain the obvious such that people do what obviously should be done? And there are two things that I think are, well, to me, that are clear. One is there's a structural issue around most governance, at least at the corporate level. The matrix organization that has been developed to run large companies has to have order. Otherwise, companies chaos. That order that has been refined in service of large is the exact impediment in service of disruptive improvement, because there's no incentive in place that encourages the front line of the company, the operators, the people who are actually doing the work to embrace change. So I think that you talk about reskilling and learning, we have to find incentives that help people pull or push or be self-motivated to learn and embrace new technology. And the other thing is we got to make technology more friendly. The fanciness of technology for business is just overboard. The simplicity that we encounter on our phones and the ability to do things super simply that have super clear outcomes needs to find its way into social causes through technology that encourages action, and then it's got to find its way into business to make it more fun to use a technology that makes things better.
Right. And Andrew, you alluded to it earlier, the whole issue of governance around AI. So maybe just build on what Brad was talking about in terms of the issues you see facing business and entrepreneurs and society generally, in terms of how do you put a governance layer in there to try to make certain that AI is used safely in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Brad's made some great points. I'd probably develop it further. I think that artificial intelligence is really seriously here. In the global financial crisis, many of you would remember, most of you would be too young, of course, but in the GFC, my major competitors, they sold assets or they diluted their shareholders by massive new issues. We decided not to do that. We decided to drop our operating costs with a huge bet on what was then known as machine learning. Now, we've done around 50 million kilometres of complete machine-controlled operations with trucks and small vehicles and drill rigs and the whole box and dice. But it taught me that there was no thought whatsoever around the repercussions, and the repercussions were that we were going to lose a third of our workforce, and they came under threat almost overnight. When it started to work, our costs started to dive, and our risk of mass unemployment went through the roof. So we went through a 5-year reskilling program called Trade Up, and it's worked really incredibly well. We've expanded the company by 300%. We need all those people. They've got the culture. I think, to Brad's point, when you grow really big, that governance, which is kind of the dead hand of entrepreneurialism and initiative and energy and taking risk, you've got to kind of replace with something else. So we at Forrest have replaced it with a very hard belief in culture, and it's a risk-taking culture. Like, you are required to go for the crazy brave plan A. That's your job. By the way, have a bulletproof plan B there, please, so you don't bring the company down when when the plan A. Normally they don't work, right, Brad? So be used to failure, but have a crack at it. That's your job if you work at Fortescue. So when I think about AI governance, I've had a lot of experience with it. We had a close shave ourselves. I now see the amplification of what we believe is the most powerful element we know in the universe that we're aware of, guys, and that is the human brain. Well, if you can recursively improve that many millions of times, then you're dealing with a power which is just so breathtakingly powerful in the years to come that you'll look back on today and you'll think, we were so horse and cart. Now, the trick is, can we look back on today then? Because we might improve our DNA at around about 1 or 2 bits a year. AI can improve itself millions of bits per second. So it's just going to leave humans behind. Our ability to be able to control that becomes extremely important. And when you've got the big tech houses who publish enormously to hundreds of millions of people, I mean, Rupert Murdoch saw nothing of this, and they can publish directly to you, or in my case, they can take my image, turn it into a talking head, say, Mr. Forrest didn't make any money on iron ore, he made it all on Bitcoin. Send your money to this account in Uzbekistan. And dear old retirees all over Australia are doing it. And yet the tech companies involved in it who are flogging that advertising, they're not responsible. They say, hey, we're just a billboard. Well, that's the danger of unregulated AI just at the outset. So I think regulation is really savagely needed, and it won't stop cancer being cured because it can track the evolving DNA as quick as DNA can evolve. It won't stop any of the things, but what it could stop is hideous repercussions, because there's equal upside as there is downside in any new initiative. And we're only sitting here because mankind's been able to control that downside. Enough, atomic weapons, etc., we're still here. But with AI, if we don't control that downside, we may not be.
Yeah. Well, I want to pivot to a topic, because you kind of alluded to it in that example, it's kind of also knowing the ecosystem partners that are there and everybody kind of washing their hands and saying, well, it's not us. We're not really the bad guys. But it's raising a different issue, and you dealt with it at your company, which is knowing your supply chain and knowing your suppliers. And you had some situations where you really got involved in investigating some of your suppliers in terms of perhaps labor practices that weren't at the right level. And talk a little bit about the responsibility companies have to kind of understand who they deal with as suppliers and providers, and how you deal with that in terms of both, obviously doing the right thing, but reputational issues and what you've done with your company.
Yeah, so we took a view. It sounds very unfair, but we took a view that our suppliers are likely to be guilty. Now, that sounds really harsh, right? You think, well, hang on, isn't Lord Fortescue's rule that you're innocent until proven guilty? We don't take that, right? We say no. Demonstrate to us that you've got clean hands in your supply chains, and that, in my own case, uncovered some really horrible slavery by a huge British PLC who was supplying goods to me, probably to Brad, everyone all over Europe and North America. They all had slavery in their supply chains. I just happened to find it. And I went public. I said, look, there's thousands of people being enslaved in most disgusting conditions, life expectancy less than 5 years. But we took it on the chin. And unless companies do that, particularly in the seafood industry where we've got millions of slaves, Walmart et al., if you assume your suppliers are okay, then they're going to assume their suppliers are okay, and one of them down that 35-metre long chain of names will have slavery.
Yeah. I think, first of all, you are one of the great entrepreneurs. I met you 2-3 years ago, and the more I get to know you, the more remarkable you are in your willingness to just be outrageously clear and then outrageously committed to deal with whatever clarity shows, both philanthropically and in your business. The opportunity to basically make all of us accountable for what transparency gives us is what you're talking about, and then it provokes better questions. Or when we talk about how are we going to control AI or regulate it, I went to law school, and if there's one thing, I never practiced law for a day, but I did learn a lot. And one of the things that you learn is a regulatory body going to understand this? No. Mm-hmm. Likely not. They're not going to understand the way everyone in this room understands AI and machine learning, number one. Number two is, therefore what? Will an administrative body understand it? Probably not, because there's going to be a lot of outside pressure. The back door to regulation is interpretation of the law. And so you start to learn through, even though lawyers are not at the center when we think about regulatory excellence, what they do have is the ability to interpret what the laws are and literally modify what the capital letter definition is of a given term. So when I start to think about a hopeless or a very challenging situation that I got to explain to my daughters questions about existentialism, how many centuries until humans, what happens? You start to say, who could be the change agents? It might be the judges, who might have the ability to more independently, without voters and lobbyists, independently look at words, literally words, and redefine how we think about the words that govern us. Just a thought, because how else are you going to change? People are not organized the way, at least in Australia and America, to understand what we're talking about.
A really good point. I completely agree.
And Brad, I know AI has been one of the things. You've even used AI in, I think, Nepal, where you kind of did some work, looked at patterns, and also tried to. So technology can help deal with some of these issues in supply chain and aberrations that perhaps start to float, that the data sees that the individual perhaps doesn't.
Absolutely. Data, once we start listening to the machines and the data, if you listen close enough, you can improve a lot. Part of our orientation around machines, manufacturing, et cetera, is process improvement only goes so far. And after process improvement from Kaizen and Deming, then what? There hasn't been anything. And now all of a sudden there's something that, we can operate with more precision by being more proactive and predictive in what humans otherwise couldn't hear or see. hence AI and machine learning. But beyond that, the idea that companies, should give money and time to build parks and stuff like that, but companies, in my opinion, should do what they're best at, which is whatever they're best at, and try to use that as a force of good. And that's why we give away software, but more oriented towards let's solve problems versus give away free licenses. Let's actually try. So we've done human trafficking and college persistence are two of the issues that we've taken on as a company, trying to do what we do anyways for profit, do it for more societal profit.
Yeah, and now I want to pivot and then we're going to come to the audience so you guys start thinking of your questions a little bit to entrepreneurs giving back, and both of you have done that as well. And Andrew, maybe just start a bit more about what you've been doing with Minderoo and some of the priorities there around what you're doing from a more of a societal perspective, and maybe address kind of the importance you think that entrepreneurs play in kind of business, but also the contribution back to a broader societal kind of pivot and message.
Okay, well, look, I just want to pick up on my friend's message. Philanthropy is really good, and if it's courageously applied, and I have to say, you talk about big organisations getting so conservative to run their big organisations, they end up doing next to nothing. Then big organisations who are in that sector as well can be very slow moving, just like businesses. So I have a view that aggressive philanthropy is fantastic, and I'm happy to share some stories with you. But let there be no doubt in this room and beyond, the most powerful force to improve this world is highly ethical business. If you have highly ethical business, you have an organisation which is self-sustaining, absolutely invigorated by what they do, and setting a better and better example to colleagues all over the world, competitors all over the world. So highly ethical business is really the key, I think, to macro improvement to a better world.
So how do you instill that culture in your organization in terms of just cascading that and saying, hey, these are the game rules in our organization. If you're with the company, this is how I expect you to act. What have you done anything? Is there a magic? Is it you in the bully pulpit and it's high profile executions? Or,
all of the above. Yeah. Look, we do have this kind of a harder edged expression. I mean, it sounds quite cuddly to have 10 cultural values you all stick by, but it is a little bit FIFO. It's not fly in, fly out. It's fit in or.
Yeah.
So
yes.
So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
And we have 10 values, and if you're not prepared to stand by those 10 values, then I openly say at meetings, I'm really happy to help you find somewhere else better suited to you. It's not here. Yeah. You've got great skills, otherwise you wouldn't be here, but let me help you find somewhere else better suited to you. I've had that conversation a lot of times, and I say to all my leaders, if you're not telling people about those cultural values so many times each day, by the time you say it at the end of the day again, you're going to vomit all over your shoes. Then it's probably just getting through, and that's how hard we drive our values.
I have the same experience. I say if after I've said it, 30 or 40 times, maybe the entire enterprise could repeat back. The entire enterprise, everybody could repeat back the essence of what I said. The leader's responsibility is to say it over and over and over. Just like the best example is look at religion. It's one of the great marketing stories of all time. They say the same thing over and over and over. They put it to music. They bring community around it. But it's fundamentally a message around ethics and culture. And I also think that culture starts with what you say no to. And you're saying no to people who don't fit. I completely agree. A firm, quick no when there's a cultural or ethical misfit is the surest way to, instantly explain that you're serious about ethical and values-based culture.
So where do you guys think you are on that journey in your organizations and getting that culture? I mean, do you feel like you've made a pretty good start? Do you feel like that the company and the employees are really, they kind of get it?
Yeah, look, I think if either of us were to say, "Oh no, we're pretty good," we're done, that's when we're just about to collapse.
Yeah.
So no, I'd like to say for Fortescue, it's well on the beginning of its journey, and for Minderoo, which is a younger, smaller organisation, it's very much at the beginning of its journey, but it's getting it. We had to deploy a huge amount of people at very short notice for the bushfires, and the first thing we didn't talk about first aid or emergency service or first responders or what to do in a crisis. We talked about these are the 10 cultural values. You miss any one of those because you're all going into extreme pressure now. Many of you will go into dangerous and very high stress situations. Miss any one of these cultures at any time, which will protect you and protect the people you're looking after, you're straight out. Live by these 10 cultures in everything you do. The communities you serve and yourself will be safe.
Right.
I think what's cool is that there's more questions from employees that are earlier career, let's say, people that are newer to the workforce. Questions about what do we stand for? What is our purpose? There's an acceptance of a more philosophical conversation and not just a practical go do this. I use mental models. I use first principles. I write lots of letters to our entire company, trying to explain not just the what, but the why and the for what purpose, and based upon what clear essence. And you hope it gets through, but like Andrew said, you keep saying it over and over in different ways. But the application of philosophy in business is similar to your orientation around business as the best creator of greatness. By putting philosophy around it and having a framework for the why and the for what purpose and how it helps you be a better person, I think it further strengthens the corporation, for profit or not for profit, as a force for global good.
So I'm going to open up to I've got one more question for these guys, and then I'm going to come to the audience. More on a personal note, and you talked a little bit about philanthropy and giving back. Andrew, you're passionate about plastics. You mentioned it earlier in the ocean, and you've invested significant time, money, and whatnot into that. What motivated, why did that become for you kind of a personal issue that you felt it was something that you needed to step in, you wanted to commit some time to it? Just talk a little bit about kind of how you landed there.
Okay, well, thank you. I've been agitated by the state of the ocean since I was little. When I used to camp on the beaches, I grew up on a cattle station, 1 million odd acres, and had access to these beautiful, completely isolated beaches, which my family and I used to camp on. And then I asked my father once, "What are the stars doing on the ocean?" I thought the stars were in the sky. And he said, "Oh, they're dredging out all the coral. The coral are getting in the road of the prawn fisheries, so we're just getting rid of the coral." The crystal blue waters turned muddy overnight, and they never recovered. And prawns don't mind that, but everyone else does. And so every holiday I've gone on, I've kind of agitated. I'd really like to study the ocean. So eventually I got a put up or shut up by my family, who are now old enough to say that to me. And so I applied to do a PhD 4 years ago in marine ecology, and I completed it. I did my viva voce in November, and it didn't teach me about marine life that I was hoping. It taught me about marine death, and death at the hands on unbelievable scale at the hands of plastic. And it's not the plastic you think, it's the plastic you can't see that is wiping out marine mammals everywhere, and it really does raise a very big question mark for terrestrial mammals, including us. Would you like me to talk about it now, or kick it back?
No, just keep going on a little bit more.
Okay. Well, it's I've kicked 300 million into a organisation called See the Future to basically start measuring plastic so that everyone in this room and beyond knows if they're buying good plastic or bad plastic. And good plastic is defined as 100% recyclable or compostable, down to its natural elements, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, but not down to what many companies say, degradable or biodegradable. That's down to a thing called a nanoplastic. And I serve on the United Nations Expert Council for Marine Waste. And nanoplastic is just starting to emerge even into that expert council at the UN. Nanoplastic has been killing fish for years, and it can pass straight through your skin. It has a positive charge, so it's going to pick up anything with a negative charge. Negative charges are toxins. And it's not like a strychnine or a cyanide, which is probably going to knock over one animal or two, and that's it. This circulates and circulates for hundreds of years. It looks like a broken little piece of glass under a microscope. And what's very worrisome for me is that we put a lot of capital into brain cancer, pediatric brain cancer, because it's this uncrackable disease. And to get the medicine into a child's brain to stop the tumour, nearly impossible because of the blood-brain barrier. Now, when I asked other experts, have you examined cadavers for nanoplastics in the brain? In each case, I've been told, yeah, and we found it. Now, I think that's an extreme concern because our consumption of plastic, like it or not, is going straight up. And it's not the microplastics you hear about. It's certainly not the plastic bags and stuff like that, which kills dolphins. I hate that. But what I'm deeply concerned about is the impact on the human brain. And we already know that nanoplastic coagulates in human tumours, in your pancreas, in all sorts of things, causes obesity, etc. That's science proved. But cancer in the brain, that is all new. And I think it's a really dangerous game changer which we need to take close attention to.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And in particular, given your conversation about the human brain has got to be kind of staying ahead of what's happening in business and AI, you want to be.
I don't want a piece of plastic designing the AI.
Right,
We'll all be
there
dead.
we go. Exactly. And Brad, you spend quite a bit of time with kind of underserved or underrepresented youth, the entrepreneurship, the future founders, and some of that. Talk a little bit about that. How did you get involved in that? Why do you think it's important to kind of promote the entrepreneurial spirit?
Well, first of all, that you got a PhD adds to my respect for you. So it's phenomenal. Like the curiosity that you live with is remarkable.
It's a good way to annihilate 4 years.
And stay young. And the orientation that my passion around entrepreneurs is simply around the belief that the role of an entrepreneur is to break through what is the status quo. So whether it's philanthropically, philanthropically, my belief is all money in private hands can't even touch the problem that needs to be solved in so many areas. So that's a hopeless or a less hope orientation, but entrepreneurs can. So I think that at age 50, I'm sure I'm going to have a different opinion with time and an understanding that it's not always true that money can't significantly change the game. But I do think at this moment in time, while I'm still focused on building businesses, I'm also interested in finding super provocative entrepreneurs who are committed to societal good, because those people, when you find them, are worth not just backing, but supporting and mentoring and investing in, because they can move mountains more often than lots and lots of small fundraisers. So my orientation around, at this moment, trying to find philanthropic activity that either enforces or enhances the understanding of entrepreneurship or identifies entrepreneurial emerging leaders and rewards them, if you will, embraces them with resources and connectivity, is a way to leverage today, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
And look, I think identifying entrepreneurial leaders in philanthropy is just smack on.
Yep.
It's a really noble pursuit.
Excellent. All right, I've been teasing you with the opportunity to ask questions. I'm going to just turn to the audience here and see, do we want a microphone on that? Probably. It'll be easier. It'll be easier to do that. How about I come out, and be your favorite talk show host? All right. Introduce yourself and direct the question.
I'm Daniel Schwartz, a member of YPO in Manhattan and in Budapest, Hungary. What you're both doing is super impressive. There's a slight tension. I'd be curious to hear, because there's one argument of bold, brazen, super ethical business leaders really being the force for change. And there's another one of sort of judges and legislation and the like. I'd sort of be curious to hear your thoughts on that, of how are we actually going to change the world? And the second one, in terms of bold, brazen bets, Dr. Forrest, would you speak a little bit about the Global Slavery Index? How did you come up with the idea? How did you launch it? And what made it successful?
Okay, so why don't you kick off?
Really quick. I think that I don't rely on. It's an interesting question, and I don't believe that legislators or judges will be the provokers of the solutions. I do think that that creative and clever advocates and social entrepreneurs and perhaps lawyers are going to ask better questions that force recognition that the game has changed in terms of the input. Therefore, the output has to be a little bit different. Just a hopeful orientation. And the only other clarity that I believe is always true from a first principle standpoint is that if you can give more information clearer and more obvious to a person when they're faced with a decision that might go good or bad, they're more likely to do good. Personal opinion, and that leads to data visualization, data transparency, and putting facts in front of everyone better. That's, I think, worth investing in.
So I'd also build on that. I think that legislators, judges, etc., have a better chance of making good decisions if they have the best access to information. My really deep concern about artificial intelligence is that it's being designed by people who do not have necessarily a strong philosophical or moral code or a training in law. They're designed by engineers who are wonderful people who can write code and algorithms and et cetera, but they might be complete moral Fruit Loops. And we've got to bring in philosophers and heavy-duty lawyers into that design space so that you protect society with this massive power you're unleashing. So on that score, I completely agree. I came across slavery through my daughter Grace and her experience in Nepal with child sex trafficking. And so I started to harden up against it and investigated. And then, as you heard me admit, we found slavery in our own supply chains. It's when I worked out that 70% of slaves are actually forced labour, like you have in the seafood industry. So the problem with slavery, right, and, hardcore entrepreneur, if it doesn't avail itself to measurement, probably doesn't exist. You certainly can't measure it. And I told a chap called Bill Gates, who is a Giving Pledge mate, that I'm going very hard after slavery, and he asked me why and what is it, and so I explained it to him, and then he gave me some blunt advice. He said, look, I'm going to have a bad day after this meeting, Andrew, and I'm going to be troubled tonight. But I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and I'm not going to care. And I was kind of shocked by that and said, why is that, Bill? And he said, because you can't measure this industry. And until you can measure it, there's no way you can manage it. And until you can manage it, I'm just not going to be interested. And so we started the Global Slavery Index so we could get governments around the world and companies defending themselves through providing information to feed into an index. And then we got the Gallup organisation to actually back that very deep data of a huge team of people with interviews of people around the world. And it's more easy than you think. Like, if you can't penetrate the Middle East, what you can do is interview people who are leaving the Middle East and find out, have you ever been enslaved? You ask the same question amongst hundreds of thousands of people. The ILO then came on board, the International Labour Organization of the United Nations, and because we had a problem, they're at 21 million slaves, we're at 34 million slaves, and while there's two different numbers in the world, presidents of companies and countries used to say, oh, it doesn't exist. But when they came on board and adopted our thinking and our data collection and our interviews with Gallup, then we settled on 40.3 million slaves. Very conservative number, but that is now the Strategic Development Goal 8.7, and it's that data which is being used to measure the SDG.
I'll tell you, that story and the act of connecting disparate dots, non-obvious dots that then create exponential progress, that is what entrepreneurial leadership or entrepreneurs can do. That's something, if you say thematically, who has the role to connect disparate, non-obvious dots in service of better, that's entrepreneurs. That's the essence of what an entrepreneur's job is.
Okay. So we're going to do 2 more questions, and then we'll be sensitive. So I'm going to get you first, and then I'm coming to you. So, okay?
Shut up.
Andrew, thank you very much. You talked about the plastic, and actually I've read the reports from Newcastle University in Australia last year, 2019, and they said that actually weekly we swallow approximately 5 grams of plastic. So in the bottle of waters, then some kind of the seafood and salt as well. So that's why actually in a week we just like swallow a credit card. So that's why I would like to ask about your vision. So what kind of the maybe world associations or any others are going to do with this? Because actually it's quite a significant amount for our bodies.
Yeah, so look, plastic out of the environment as a common good is not particularly harmful in my view. I don't have the science to back that up. But what I do have the science to back up is that plastic in the environment is very dangerous. In a moving environment, like in landfill or in the ocean, and landfills, as you know, move like crazy, and that's where most plastic goes, and it moves all the time. It's breaking down into microplastic and then nanoplastic into the water column straight back into you. So I see it as really, really dangerous. And why we've put so much capital on the table, and we've got the largest companies in the world now talking to us and saying, okay, this has to be the mechanism. We need a huge mechanism for it now. There's no force big enough. If you said to the United States Defense Forces, go solve plastic, they'd just say, care? They'd be powerless. The only force big enough now is the market. And there's some good news there. Fully recycled plastic don't agree any rubbish. 50% is okay. It's not. It's rubbish. Fully recycled plastic, which is monomer back to monomer, which is the long chain, which is fully recyclable forever. It's like iron. That's pure plastic again. Strong, high tensile, high quality. We throw away about $500 billion of that a year as rubbish. So what I'm doing is saying, look, there's about a 25-30% gap between, and that's not much, right? 25-30%. Entrepreneurs can climb that, between the value of recycled plastic and the value of fossil fuel plastic. And fossil fuel plastic is the entire problem. We've got heaps of plastic. So if you can bring up the value of fossil fuel plastic till it's just a little bit above recycled plastic, bang.
It flows.
The market goes to the cheaper plastic, and every bit of plastic in the world becomes a commodity.
Yep.
Is there a measurement of the amount? Is there any approximation of the issue in terms of scope?
Yeah. So we will, as humanity, produce about 350 million tonnes of plastic, and most of that will go into the environment, like 90%. And shortly we'll be up around 1 billion tonnes of plastic. So we've got real problems.
Or maybe another question. Can you measure how much plastic is in your body?
You can actually. You can. And there is a test you can take for it. And there's a couple of high-profile people who will announce their results, and I can tell you it's pretty ugly.
Scary.
What's it
called? What?
It's let me discuss it later, but it needs people like you and I to get hold of it, because right now it costs $2,000, and I want the test to cost about $5, and then we can all take it.
Yeah, indeed. All right, last question, sensitive to time here, so you make it a good one.
I'll do my best, sir. Thank you. My name is Brad Crombie. I'm CEO of Alquity Investment Managers. We're a pure ESG and impact investment management company. So first of all, thank you for what you said today. It means a lot to us. I think everything we've been hearing today aligns with so much what we're thinking. Particularly, I'd say measurement. Measurement, we think, is the key to people adopting ESG and impact, and there is no universal way of measuring things. All right, I'm moving on. A statement and maybe an offer for Dr. Forrest, and then a question for both of you. The statement or the offer is, one of the social investments we made last year from our foundation was to a fantastic organization called Plastics for Change. It's run by a guy called Andrew Almack. He's a Canadian. I'm also Canadian, so I'm slightly biased. But he's a great guy. He just did a TED Talk, and he's all about recycled plastic. So I would love it if we could get you in front of him, get you guys to meet at some point. That'd be fantastic.
I'd be delighted. Thank you.
Thank you. Question for you both. A little bit left field. What about quantum computing? Okay, because there's an arms race going on there, big time. I happen to sit on the Business Advisory Council of the GRI. It's the Global Risk Institute in Canada. We did a big session on this about a year and a half ago. I have to say, I'm not a computer science guy, but it scared the living daylights out of me. And I would argue, perhaps, that the speed with which quantum computing is going, that risk may come to us before AI. But I'd like to know your views.
Well, I think you should go. I mean, anything which can operate at light speed is going to become a very powerful force.
I go to decision bias and the 17 decision biases that we all have, one of which is if we don't know what it is from a framework perspective, we have no idea. And the challenge of quantum computing is I could imagine so many good things, but the first of probably hundreds of bad things is passwords are no longer effective. And I don't even know how to think. That's what's probably most challenging. The speed of progress on quantum is happening so fast, but humanity has no clue about what this is going to create. And it will create, I'm sure, some outrageous fortunes and great stories of capitalizing on it. And then, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I really want to take everyone back to that simple lesson, if I can leave you with this. For any great invention, quantum computing is one, plastics is another. If you don't think through the downside, it's going to get you by the throat and drag you down with it. There's equal downside to everything in nature. Quantum computing is just part of nature. Equal downside, and which is huge upside, so just as big downside. We need to manage that downside so mankind is not hurt by it and the upside is released.
Can I have one final? I think, talk about an outrageous idea, existentialism at some point in maybe our kids' lives or at some point, not that many generations, will be a defining construct about how we make decisions, because we can eventually do so many self-destructive things. There's got to be some philosophical container. There's got to be some philosophy. I mean, look at the great civilizations pre-destruction of them, Rome and Greece. They had a philosophy that bound all the residents, and I think something like that has to start to emerge. Philosophy as a more defining, leading principle versus just capitalism or just,
Never ever before have we handed the nuclear weapon keys to the average Joe public. That's what we're doing here, and we need to have the strongest moral code ever to protect humanity through it.
Wow. All right. That was a powerful closing message. Please join me in thanking two phenomenal entrepreneurs. And certainly our hosts here at YPO, thank you so much for organizing this. We know everyone is busy in Davos, so we'll get you on to whatever next meeting and events you have. Maurice?